Hello, BookTube. This is a continuation of my 2024 library tour. This is part three of science fiction and fantasy, the return of the Boxes of Doom. Which, in case anybody wants to know, I am slowly accumulating more boxes for donation or to get rid of my books, and they're currently on the upper part of the two bookcases that are out in the hall, which is where this door leads. I know some people are not particularly fond of backgrounds in which there are doors behind um, the booktuber because of various reasons. Unfortunately, this is the only way I can film these two shelves. Shelf number three, which would be right here, and shelf number four, which is on the bottom. I guess I could. Sorry about this. See if this will work. No. I'll work it out. Okay. So let's get going with shelf number three of science fiction and fantasy. Um, so the first three books are a continuation of how we ended book shelf two with Elliot de Baudard. The first two are continuations of the Dominion of the Fallen series. First is the House of Binding Thorns, which I have read and I liked. Um, it's pretty good. I haven't read it in a while though. I really don't have much of a desire to reread it or to read the final part of the trilogy, The House of Sundering Flames. I also have by Elliot de Baudard, Fireheart Tiger, which is a slim Tor.com novella. I did dip into this one and didn't particularly like it. The next three books are by Samuel R. Delany, one of the great science fiction and fantasy writers. First up is an omnibus edition called The Fall of the Towers, um, which includes Out of the Dead City, The Towers of Toron, and City of a Thousand Suns. I picked this up from, I think, the Friends of the Library Nook at the West Waco Library and Genealogy Center. Haven't gotten around to it yet. I have dipped into the other two books by Samuel R. Delany. Triton, which I think I picked up from the Nook too. Either that or Golden's Book Exchange, which is, as of right now, the only independent used bookstore in Waco. It's also a comic book store, although it is more of a used bookstore than a comic book store. For that, you would want to go to Bankston's, which is more of a dedicated comic book store. Anyway, so Triton is kind of like one of the reasons why I don't particularly like vintage science fiction is that there are certain aspects of definitely the science, but also the world building that ages poorly, and I really have a hard time suspending my disbelief. It gnaws at me. So I ended up bailing on this when I had a go at it a few years ago, and it's been even longer since I had a go at and bailed on Dahlgren. I picked this up in San Francisco when I lived there for a few months, and I think I read it or had to go at it the year later, and I didn't get on with it. And I've never given it a bill redemption, which is probably something I should do. Whether or not I actually do is another matter entirely. Next is Pursuit of the Screamer by Anson Dibble, which I'm fairly sure I picked up from the Nook. Have no idea what this is about, never got around to reading it. Let me see when it came out. 78, so won't be eligible for Rocket Summer. Next is The Prey of Gods by Nikki Drayden. This is a near future science fiction and kind of fantasy set in South Africa. It's okay, but I didn't like it that much. Next is The Door into Fire by Diane Duane. I picked this up, I think, from the um, Friends of the Library book sale. Either the paperback or the yearly one, or maybe even Golden's. I don't quite remember. And I've never gotten around to it, which I maybe ought to. Next is a book that I'm not entirely sure why I have, and that is Vellum, which is part of the Book of All Hours duology by Hal Duncan. This is a weird retelling of The Descent of Inanna. And I bailed on it, and then I bought it. And I don't quite understand why I did that, but I do that sometimes. The next two books are by Nicholas Eames. First up is Kings of the Wild. So this came out in 2017 or 2018, and I really enjoyed it. I mean, there are some aspects of the novel that bugged me, but I really enjoyed it. However, I have not reread it. And I am considerably less fond of the sequel, Bloody Rose. Largely, the first 150 pages are rather dreadful. I don't, particularly this new cast of characters, I don't think necessarily are as endearing as the cast from the Kings of the Wild. Although the later part of the book, once you get past the first 150 to 200 pages, it gets a bit better, but it's not nearly as good as Kings of the Wild. And I don't think there is a third volume yet, which is also, I think, part of a bit of my ambiguity about whether or not I want to ever reread them or really keep them. So the next two books are by Katie Edwards, the Tarot Sequence, or the first two books of the Tarot Sequence. First up is The Last Sun, which, when I first read it, I really enjoyed it, despite some issues I had with the characters and the plot and the world building. Subsequent rereads, because I've had, I think, two rereads of the book and then a bail, or a reread and then a bail. One of the, something like that. So I mean, this is the kind of fantasy that I want more of. It's just, it didn't quite work for me, ultimately. The world building is sort of obviously with the Tarot Sequence. The aristocracy of this setting, which is sort of an urban fantasy set on an alternate Earth, is based on the major arcana of the tarot, which is a bit silly. And this aristocracy, their surnames are like St. John, St. Nicholas, St. Talbot, St. Valentine, and that again is a bit silly. And the characters increasingly tick me off with every reread. So, anyways, it turned rather disappointing. Although, sadly, The Hanged Man, the sequel, um, really I didn't get on with from the beginning. It's just a lot of the things that annoy me about the first book continues into this book, and my favorite character from the first book has a significantly reduced role as the cast expands. Next up is The Neverending Story by Michael Ende, translated from the German by Ralph Mannheim. So this is a classic of fantasy. It's one that obviously I first encountered through the film adaptations. Um, and then I wanted this for a long time, and it's okay. But I think, in a way, it's a little. I don't know. Just there's something missing, and it's been a while since I read it, so I don't quite remember what it was. The next two books are by Jane Finn. They're the two books in the Shadowlands duology. At least I think it's a duology. I don't know if there's been a third book or not. So the first book is Hidden Sun, in which a young woman goes after her brother who's disappeared. I remember enjoying it. It was okay. I did not enjoy the sequel, Broken Shadow. I could not get into this book. Of course, when I had to go at this book, it was during that end of 2019, beginning of 2020, when I started to lose my enjoyment of science fiction and fantasy. The next three books are by Lynn Llewellyn, the Night Runner series. So, Luck in the Shadows, Stalking Darkness, and Traitor's Moon. And I have not read this trilogy. The next book is another one that I'm not entirely sure why I ever bought. This is Seven Princes by John R. Fowles, the first book in the Books of the Shaper series. I remember having a go at this book years before I bought it, and I saw a copy at Golden's and picked it up, even though it did not quite work with me. So I guess maybe I intended it for Bell Redemption and have just never gotten around to it. The next book is the first Neil Gaiman book I have. We'll start part 4 of science fiction and fantasy with Neil Gaiman. Again, this is Neverwhere, which I have never read, so can't say much about it. Anyway, BookTube. That concludes Shelf 3 of Science Fiction and Fantasy. I will be back Monday with Shelf 4. And hopefully I can work out the kinks of filming down here, because obviously I have shelf 4 over here, and then a few shelves over here for history that will also present a problem. So, and if you did have concerns about the door, sorry. I'll try to work on it. So anyway, BookTube, I will be back until then. Thank you. Have a great afternoon and stay safe.